Welcome to episode 10 and the season finale of the Filmmaker Film Watcher podcast. I'm filmmaker Richard Di Gregorio.
And I'm film watcher and driver Greg Ralph.
So this episode, we are actually on the way to the Australian Podcast Awards in Sydney. So we're driving from Melbourne to Sydney on a road trip doing this podcast. So forgive us if there's some background noise, you know what that is. So we thought we'd actually look at some road movies, Greg, on the way up.
I think a road trip film is different to a road movie. A road movie is you're going somewhere. But I think a road trip movie is as much about the trip as the destination. So the journey is important. What happens to people on the journey, not just when they get there, I think is what's at the heart of this genre.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that. So the first film we're going to be looking at on this episode is the 2011 short film Nullarbor.
And then we're going to go from shorts back to our usual turf of feature films, looking at the 1991 film Thelma and Louise.
And then we're going to be looking at the 2004 film Sideways.
And then we're coming back full circle to Australia to look at the 1994 film The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Well, why don't you start us on the first of those films, Nullarbor.
Directed by Alistair Lockhart and Patrick Sarrell, Nullarbor is a short animated road movie comedy about a young man, Waddy, who is travelling across the barren landscape of Australia's Nullarbor Plain. He's desperate for a cigarette, so when he notices a cigarette packet in another car, he tries to persuade the car's driver, Bernie, to give him one. When he doesn't, they set upon challenging each other in various funny ways. Now, this short was a major success at international short film festivals, even travelling with the Animated Short Academy Award nominees across cinemas in the US. And you can see why. The animation is just superb, with the quality of a Pixar short. The gorgeous cliffs and ocean is a standout. The story itself is light and funny and perfect for a short film. The characterizations are also great, especially Bernie. Now, I've seen this short many times and it still gives me a smile. The filmmaking team went on to produce another great short film, The Gallant Captain, with well-known author Graham Bass of Animalia fame. Greg, what did you think of Nullarbor?
Well, first of all, I think it's bizarre that we're doing a short film for the first time in the history of our podcast when we're doing a long road trip, but I'll put that to one side, Ricardo.
It's true.
Oh, look, I liked it. Have you ever crossed the Nullarbor before, though?
I've never crossed the Nullarbor, no.
I've done it 4 times, 3 times by bus and once by car, and it's a very Australian experience. You really are travelling across the bottom side of Australia in a vehicle of whatever sort, and the road just goes on and on and on. It's really quite unique, and I think they've really captured it in this film.
Oh, I think the lighting and the gorgeous lighting in this of the animation is beautiful, and it's great. This colouring is gorgeous,
and it does feel very Australian. And I think you're spot on about. I think for me one of the highlights is the landscapes, and not just the ocean ones at the end, but even at the start. You know, the sky and the road signs. It just feels real. And then you get these obviously animated characters against it. And it just works. I think you're spot on. And in fact, I think I recognise the cliffs that they sit on at the end of the film.
Really?
I'm pretty sure I know from, sadly, decades ago, that cliff is the one that you pull over to take your first photographs of the Western Australian coast.
Oh, wow.
So, I really relate to the story as being a real place, but of course an extraordinary, series of events. It really reminded me of being a bit like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
It actually had that effect with me too, because there's no dialogue in the film. It's just They use like a Gramalot.
It felt to me like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, because there's a couple of times when Waddy's car was pretty much destroyed, and then next it's like the car's reset and the race is continuing. It's quite like that, but it's interesting too how you said in your intro, but it's like a Pixar short, because that hadn't struck me, but now that you said it, I think you're right.
Oh yeah, to me the quality of it is just like a Pixar short. I think it's right up there,
And I honestly think it would be better than some of the Pixar shorts I've seen from time to time. For me, in this kind of genre, the benchmark, even though it's not truly a short film, the benchmark for me is the first 10-15 minutes of Pixar's Up film, which is the story of a marriage from meeting in childhood all the way through to when the man survives his partner's death. And
Yeah,
I
that
find
is beautiful.
It's just
beautiful.
and you and I talked about that before amongst ourselves. It's succinct, it's expressive, and it's moving. In the first 10-15 minutes of what you think is this kid's film, as an adult, you're very emotionally moved and engaged. So for me, that would be the pinnacle. But I think this is not up. But I think this does very well against some of the other, and I have to say, less engaging Pixar shorts that I've seen. So I think they've done a great job, and again, just because it feels so Australian, yay team.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. What do you think?
I'm kind of hovering between a 7 and an 8. I think it's a 7 because I'm not sure that I would get lots more out of it every time I watched it. I really enjoyed it in its own right. I was a bit disturbed by the level of detail when Waddy moons Bernie. There was a certain visual level of detail there I didn't really care to see.
Yeah, his bum crack looks like yellow.
Yeah,
it's like he hasn't showered for a long time.
But maybe that was meant to be a metaphor. A different kind of skid mark. I don't know. But yeah, look, I'll give it a 7.
I agree with that. Okay, so the next film we're going to discuss is the 1991 film Thelma and Louise. So take us away, Greg.
Okay. Thelma Dickinson, Gina Davis, and Louise Sawyer, Susan Sarandon, are two friends who decide to go for a weekend fishing trip to have a break from their normal routine and the men in their lives. But the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray. I say men deliberately here because this 1991 film takes a typically male trope of the buddy movie where the protagonists fall outside the law and crafts the tale around two women. Interestingly, it was written by a woman, Callie Curry, but then directed by a man, Ridley Scott. I suspect that would be different these days. When Thelma is almost raped and only saved because Louise has a gun, they have to go on the run when the would-be rapist is killed. They plan to escape to Mexico, which becomes a promised land, where they can leave their past behind and embrace a new life together. Along the way, they pick up a hitchhiker, JD, Brad Pitt in his early breakout role, who gets up close and very personal with Thelma, while Louise is next door with her boyfriend Jimmy, Michael Madsen, trying to work out what future they have in these new circumstances. Their encounter with JD seals their fates as outlaws, despite the best efforts of policeman Hal, Harvey Keitel, to rescue them from a bad end. The final scene of this film is one of the most iconic endings of modern movies. I'm not sure, Ricardo, if we should say what happens, despite many people already knowing, whether or not they've previously seen it. I hadn't, and I knew. For me, this is definitely a road trip movie. The crux of the story is the journey and how it transforms the travellers. Davis and Sarandon are terrific in their parts and completely believable. Their evolution and the balance and love between them makes sense and works. When one woman is weak, the other steps up. It left me wondering about our road trip though, Ricardo. Which one of us is Thelma and which Louise? Although, I do have my theories. Certainly, I've formulated some ground rules for this trip. Number 1, no picking up strange men. Number 2, no shooting them and no armed robberies, unless of course we both agree. And in fact, the only bullets permitted on this trip are those chocolate and licorice ones that I know you love.
Yeah.
Look, I liked this film, but I didn't love it. It was good to finally see it, but I preferred the first 3/4 or so of it. When it built up into a Smokey and the Bandit multi-police car chase, I began to lose interest. And I disliked the way that Jimmy pretty much fell out of the story once he returned from seeing Louise and was picked up by the police. I wanted to know more about what he told them and what he made of their developing fates. Anyway, Ricardo, what do you think?
I really love this film. I think it's very, very good. I remember the stir it caused in 1991. I mean, I wasn't that old at the time. I think I was in year 8 at the time, but I still remember the stir it caused for women and for feminism. I think the performances are wonderful. I think Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon are just superb.
It's one of those films where you can't actually imagine anybody else in those roles.
No, you can't. You can't. They are iconic roles. Let's talk about it from a filmmaking angle. I think it's beautifully done. The landscapes and everything are just beautifully handled.
The landscapes are standouts.
Yeah. So I think they're driving through sort of the the red belt of America, and it makes me want to travel through there. Really,
Do you mean the kind of the Grand Canyon?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
They are stunning.
They're stunning, but even the story though, because I think they really go on a journey, and that's what's so good about it.
Exactly.
From the very beginning, I mean, they are different women. By the end of the movie, you know, and I think we all know what the end is, but just in case you haven't seen it, I won't tell you. But when they get to that moment, you know, from the start of the movie to that end is understandable in that, which is very weird. You know, they're in a no escape situation, and what's so good?
Can you imagine the studio pitch?
Yeah, I know. But you know what's so great about it is that I think in terms of feminism and what this did for women, and just showing women being women, the friendship of women, the camaraderie.
I agree.
Is wonderful, and also with Harvey Keitel running at the end, you think he's going to save her, but he doesn't. They don't need a man to save her.
You know what that final scene reminded me of? It reminded me of the scene halfway through Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid when they have to jump off the cliff. There was that kind of similar bonding moment. This is a no way out situation. Probably we don't know what's going to happen, but let's go for it together.
That's right, exactly. But that journey, though, I mean, Gina Davis Thelma has an amazing journey from the very beginning. She's, you know, internal. She's, you know, repressed. You know, she's held back by that. But the relationship with the husband, which I think Christopher McDonald, I think his name is,
Christopher McDonald, yes,
who plays the husband,
who once actually was engaged in real life to Gina Davis before this film.
Really? Oh, wow! I didn't know
before
that.
she met Jeff Goldblum.
Look, I'm not a massive fan of that performance. I really can't see.
I'm the same, actually.
I can't see the relationship where it began. I can't see where it began.
And I didn't believe it when they flicked back to him and when they're about to go over the cliff and he's sitting there, you know, in tears. I didn't know where that came from. And then again, why wasn't Jimmy shown? That was, to me, the more interesting response.
Yeah, you're right. And I think we were invested in both characters, but I was invested in Jimmy more than I was with Daryl.
In fact, I went and watched some of the deleted scenes afterwards, and there was a scene where he was speaking to Hal and the senior policeman, Stephen Tobolowsky, where he told them about the JD character, and they go to find him, and he watches later him being brought in to be arrested, but nothing else. And again, why was he dropped? You know, I thought he was part of the emotional centre of the film.
But I mean, his journey did have an end, though. I mean, he helped her out with the money, and then they did have a discussion. You know, I think his journey did finish. I don't, you know, whereas Christopher's didn't. I mean,
I don't think Jimmy knew that he was about to lose her.
Oh, I think he had an idea, an inkling that he was going to lose her, that she wasn't going to return. I think there was an inkling there. But anyway, I felt the character of Daryl was, you know, I could see Jimmy and Louise and their relationship. I didn't feel anything. I didn't know where it began. I thought there's no way that she would fall for him in a bar. He's such an unlikable person and a character. Yeah.
And what did you think of Brad Pitt?
He's very good. You know, you can see he's got movie star quality written all over him in that role. I think it's the role that pretty much set his career going forward.
Do you know who the two finalists were for that part?
Who?
Well, Brad Pitt, obviously, and George Clooney. They were neck and neck for a long time, and in the end, obviously, Clooney didn't get the part, and he wasn't entirely happy about it. Said it took him years to watch the film to be able to, and then he watched it and he thought, you know what, I couldn't have done that. Brad Pitt was a better choice. And now they're buddies. Yeah, they're like you and me.
Yeah, now they're good friends. That's pretty amazing. I think what's sad is that people still look to this movie for, you know, strong female roles. And
what, a quarter of a century later?
Yeah, well, it didn't really do that much, really. I mean, what came after it, there wasn't that much change, was there, really?
What's the name of that test where women are standalone characters rather than male dependent?
It's the Blechtel test, yeah.
Well, this film would blow that away.
Oh, it does.
And I think you're right. I don't know that would have happened in a lot of films until maybe relatively recently.
Well, it does pass that. I mean, the Blechtel test, if anybody doesn't know, you've got to have at least two women who don't talk about men all the time and speak more than the male characters.
And it's interesting that the film is about two strong women. It's written by a woman, and as I said at the start, that Ridley Scott is a male director, and Callie Curry did not at first want him to direct the film. but she was convinced on the strength of the fact that he'd written Alien around a female lead, Sigourney Weaver's Ripley character, when he didn't have to. That was the convincer.
Well, you know, the writing is from a woman, so whether it's directed by a man or a woman, it's beautifully done, and the content is already there in the screenplay. So it was very believable, all of the situations they sort of went in when Louise did kill the guy. She wasn't going to at the beginning after, you know, attempting to rape Thelma. His awful attitude, you just went, F you know. So it's a great film. It's a really good road trip movie.
For those who are outside Australia, we actually have our national elections this weekend, and we're coming up to Gundagai, where the tucker box dog is.
That's right.
For the locals, where we have to go and vote. So we probably need to wrap this part of the journey up. So, out of 10?
I'm giving this an 8 out of 10.
I'm the same. When I first watched it, I thought maybe a 7, because I really got a bit bored with the car chase stuff at the end. I thought I'd seen that quite a few times before. But then, you know, I watched it maybe 2 or 3 days ago, and it's grown on me. So, yeah, I think it's an 8. Okay, well, we've done our bit for Australian democracy with a few attempts there.
We had a democracy sausage.
Yes, well, people outside Australia won't know what that means, but it's become traditional to have a barbecued sausage after you go to vote. We call it the democracy sausage, as Ricardo just said. But it took a few attempts. We only had one sausage, but we had 3 attempts to vote because because of the road trip, we're actually outside our home state, and that introduced a degree of difficulty that we weren't expecting in country Australia, but we got there. Finally in Yass, hello to the good folk at St Clement's Church.
Absolutely.
We finally got to vote and we're on the road again. So
on the road again.
Thank you, Willie. I am back in the driver's seat, trying to reassert some QA into this podcast, Ricardo. But nevertheless, I'm going to let you have a go. Why don't you tell us about Sideways?
Sure thing. Directed by Alexander Payne, who also directed the acclaimed films Election, About Schmidt, The Descendants, and Nebraska, comes the 2004 film Sideways, which centres itself around Miles Raymond, Paul Giamatti, a depressed middle school English teacher, divorcee, and failed writer who wants to give his best friend Jack, Thomas Hayden Church, a self-obsessed ex-soap-style actor, he wants to give him a great time away before he gets married. So they head off, road movie style, to the stunning and beautiful Californian wine country for a week of fun, relaxation and wine drinking, as Miles is a wine aficionado. Things don't go to Miles' plan of relaxation, however, as Jack is more concerned with getting one last fling in the bag. At Miles' favourite restaurant, the Hitching Post, they encounter waitress Maya, Virginia Madsen, who knows Miles from previous visits, and they also meet Stephanie, Sandra Oh, at another winery, who also knows Maya. Jack and Stephanie hit it off immediately, and Jack organises a double date for them all. Miles tries, but is also grieving the loss of his marriage and finds it hard to let Maya in, even though she's interested in him. Jack and Stephanie are all over each other, however, which concerns Miles, especially when Jack starts to get further involved, meeting with Stephanie's family and younger daughter, which makes him begin to question his upcoming marriage. When Miles accidentally tells Maya that Jack is getting married, she instantly defends Stephanie, and so begins the conflict, which leads to some touching and very funny moments. Look, there is so much to like about this film. As a director, Alexander Payne is more focused on the characters and their journeys than anything else. He won't move the camera unless he has to, and every shot is perfectly composed. The screenplay is wonderful too. The way it relates to wine character, to human character, is just so wonderful. When Miles explains to Maya why Pinot Noir is his favourite wine, his reasons completely echo himself. It's great screenwriting. Pinot Noir is now apparently the highest selling wine in Californian wine country due to this film. They call it the Sideways effect. The performances of Thomas Hayden Church, Virginia Madsen and Sandra Oh are all very good, which is expected given character is everything in Payne's work, but Paul Giamatti is just so fantastic in the complex role of Miles. Unlike a lot of films, all the ingredients come together beautifully here, and even though it's been 15 years since it's released, it just keeps getting better with age. Greg, what did you think?
Well, I'm delighted to see that you're belabouring the wine metaphors just as much as Payne does. Look, my response to this movie is,
Oh, give me a break.
no, and I know a lot of people love this film. I've mentioned,
Including me.
yes, I know, and I've mentioned to one or two others in the lead up to this road trip that I'm not a fan of the film, and they look at me as though there's something cerebrally wrong with me, or I don't have a heart or something. I don't know what it is. Maybe I should go to Oz.
Okay,
That's a different road
can
movie.
you please just elaborate on why you don't like this
okay.
movie,
Well,
Greg?
The two male characters, I just don't care about them, even Miles. So when it starts,
Ah,
well, I can actually explain.
yeah, okay, go.
So when the movie starts, Miles is a bit pretentious about his wine. I'm sorry, I'm not a wine buff. I don't particularly get it. And I found his whole speech about the Pinot Noir was heavy-handed because there's
No!
Yes, he said patiently, because there's no way Miles could not have realised he was talking about himself to Maya at that stage. He just doesn't ring true, unless it's his big chat-up line, and I don't think it was...
But no, that's not. It's not meant to be a chat-up line.
Exactly, and that's why I think it falls flat, because it's meant to be unknowing, and I cannot see how he would not see that it was really describing himself. But let me jump back.
Okay.
You said that Miles is a wine aficionado, and he is. So you've got a wine expert for winer, because Jack's defining characteristics, which you failed to mention, is he is a classic narcissist. It's all about him.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
even I'm not going to ask you which of us is Miles, which is Jack. I'd be too frightened of the answer. But moving right along, like this car. So there are a few times when Jack expresses concern for Miles, such as, oh, don't you remember how small your wife used to make you feel, and I'm going to get you laid, you really need to get laid, and so on. But his relationship with Miles is inch deep, if that. And it makes sense that they were college roommates, because, people get thrown together and then you have history and so on. And by the end of the film, it's quite clear that Miles realises that Jack does not care about him, and in fact, he doesn't care all that much about Jack, really.
Yeah.
But I just... he was such a painful character. And everything was about him, to the point where he gets Miles to crash his car for him so he can have a decent alibi for why he's been off sleeping with somebody else.
That's funny.
He gets Miles to break into somebody's house to get his wallet back.
Oh, come on. That sequence is hilarious.
Oh, look, it's funny.
That is so funny.
Well, let me put it this way. Would you do that for me?
Well, they would
Think
do it for
very
each other.
carefully before
Hang
you
on,
answer.
they would do it for each other, and
It's such a one-sided,
I believe
imbalanced
them.
relationship.
yeah,
Now,
but it is. But
to me, the heart of the film was actually Maya. I really liked Virginia Madsen's performance, and
I love her.
I don't know how much else I've seen her in. I've seen her more recently in the Netflix series Designated Survivor, where for a while she's the main foil against Kiefer
I haven't
Sutherland.
seen that.
And she's okay in that. I suspect I've seen her in something else before, but I did appreciate her performance a lot more. She is an absolutely believable character. And
I think they all are.
well, they're believable, but so I just didn't care about the men by and large. They are all good performances. I'm not a huge fan of Alexander Payne's movies. I've seen Election.
Oh, really?
And I wonder what all the fuss was about. I've seen About Smit. I enjoyed the conceit of Jack Nicholson's character writing these completely inappropriate letters to his overseas sponsored child about his life and what's wrong with it and what's going on.
Yeah.
That for me has been the better of his films. I haven't seen Nebraska, and I think one day I would like to.
Oh,
but
The Descendants was great as well.
I actually haven't seen that either. I just don't feel drawn to his work.
Oh, well, there we go. We're going to disagree on that one. I love his work.
And as I said at the very start of this episode about what I think constitutes a road trip movie, for me this is not a road trip movie. So
Oh, it is. They travel to. Hang on a minute. They travel to California wine country. You say it's about the road trip. Well, it is the road trip. They travel to different wineries. Different things happen.
No, you misunderstand me. And
hang on a minute.
If you could let me finish my point before you completely demolish it. Well, this road trip's becoming very testy. Actually, let me just pause talking about this film. I meant to say something up front, which was, it was only when we were about ready to get in the car and make this long trip, which is effectively half a week in duration, that we realised the longest that you and I have been in a car together has been to go down to the local shops to buy a pizza. So
I know.
This is a real challenge, and if we don't shut that something
Oh.
up, Because I'm determined to try and keep a family rating here. But if you don't, just
Okay.
shut up and let me make my point. This is going to be a very tense journey. Now, my point, which I have to scale back my brain to remember what it was, is about road trips. That's right. So, a road trip movie for me is about the journey, not the fact that they go somewhere. So the time they spend in the car in the movie is very, very short. It's not really at the crux of the movie. It's just that they go on a trip to a different place. And that is, for me, a holiday or a travelogue movie. It's not a road trip movie. So I think that Nullarbor, absolutely, because the whole thing is basically in a car having
right.
this kind of weird race with each other.
Yeah.
With Thelma and Louise, it's very much about the journey and, as I said earlier, how they transform with the journey itself. And ditto when we get to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, it's very much about this long journey across the heart of Australia, like Thelma and Louise across the heart of America.
Yeah.
And at the risk of becoming as heavy-handed as Alexander Payne, it's about the traveller's journey across their own hearts. See what you can make of that one, Mr. Payne.
Yeah.
But I don't think Sideways is. Sideways is a movie about characters together on a holiday, but the journey itself is almost irrelevant. I mean, they just pop down the road.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Because when Miles goes back
at
at the very end of the film, I get the sense, I don't know the geography of this story at all, but I get the sense that they're really not going very far at all. It's not a road trip movie, but that's not why I don't like it, because that's just, there's a bit of our theme.
I really love the scene with his mother, and I think there's a real sadness to that scene.
There is. And you get bits of his backstory of his family that you hear about a couple of times during the film, but I'm left wondering, I'd like to know a little bit more about what's really going on there.
Yeah, and
but the mother's a very good performance too. But I can't for the moment remember her name. I know her face, she's been in lots of things, but she plays the part very, very well.
She does.
I don't care in the slightest for Jack, and I have trouble caring for Miles.
See, I'm the opposite.
Jack is a jerk. Why are you wasting time with him? Just because he asked to be best man?
I'm actually the opposite. I really feel for Miles's character, and I love the relationship between him and Maya.
Oh, Maya, sorry,
yeah, him and Maya.
Jack.
But also the Jack relationship is just quite hilarious, and they're old school buddies, and
college buddies.
Yeah, they're old college buddies, and people change over time. I just think they've just stayed friends, but become very different people over that time. They might have really liked each other at college, but they are very different.
When you're
people.
younger and everything's exciting, and you haven't really settled in yourself as a personality, I get that. I just didn't care about them in the story.
Yeah. What about the writing aspect? I felt for Miles when his book didn't get published.
Yeah, and at the ending, towards the end of the film, rather, where Maya rings him and leaves him a voicemail message about her response to his book, and therefore her response to him as a person, that was lovely. I mean, the writing worked there, but I found some parts like that, "Hey, I'm Pinot Noir" speech very heavy-handed. See,
I'm the total opposite. I mean, I'm going to just give my score for a second, because I'm giving it a 10, and that's what I'm giving it. Okay? I love this movie a lot.
You almost caused an accident there.
It's one of my favourites. Brilliant screenwriting, brilliant direction, gorgeous work.
I won't watch this film again, and I'm giving it a 0.
That's not a truth.
No, I'm not really giving it a 0, but I'm just paying you back for Field of Dreams last time.
I gave it an 8 out of 10.
It wasn't enough, and I'm not over that yet. Ricardo, I'm sorry. This is such an emotional trip. I'm giving this a 6.
Oh, give me a break.
I'm sorry, and I know there's a lot of people.
You're in the minority. I think you're in the minority. There's not many people I know who dislike this movie at a 6 out of 10 level.
I'm not sure my wife would even have given it that. She left halfway through. I'm
what?
not alone.
What? Really?
I'm not a big fan of films where the main characters are self-indulgent. The only place where that self-indulgence works for me is in a laugh-out-loud comedy, and I don't find this to be a laugh-out-loud comedy, I'm sorry.
No, it's not, but I think it's a drama with comedy in it. But it's a dramedy.
And I'm just not interested in characters who are so self-indulgent, even Miles.
Okay.
And that's what makes Maya interesting, because she is a warm, embracing, it's not just about me kind of character. Now, Ricardo, I don't know if you know this, but there's actually been a remake of Sideways about 5 years later, filmed in America.
What?
The Japanese title, but I can't pronounce while I'm driving.
A remake?
Yeah, I'm driving, so I can't look it up, but it's a Japanese word that looks remarkably like sideways, so I'm going to say it's called Sideways. And I would be intrigued to see if they make more of it.
Why would they remake this movie? Japanese, did you say?
Yeah, well, maybe they thought it was a 6 out of 10 too.
Oh. Well, I won't be watching that one. You can give that one a go. Okay, so it's now Sunday afternoon and we've left Sydney after a fantastic night at the Australian Podcast Awards.
It was great to be there and just see the people and what's going on.
Yeah, just to be amongst a really emerging craft and art form, really.
And to feel part of it.
Yeah, to be a part of it, that's right. So, had a great night, and so thanks to everybody at the Australian Podcast Awards.
And the ones that we particularly had some one-on-one time with to meet.
Absolutely. So our fourth film we're going to discuss now is The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So take it away, Greg.
Thank you. Drag queen lip-sync performer Tick, Hugo Weaving, performs in cabaret in Sydney, comfortable in his world, until he gets a phone call offering cabaret work at a resort in outback Alice Springs. He recruits co-performer Adam, Guy Pearce in his breakout performance, and Bernadette, a transgender alumnus of Les Girls, Terence Stamp, to go with him. They acquire a bus, which they name Priscilla, to drive across the desert to get to the heart of Australia. Along the way, all three reveal secrets or have their values and expectations challenged. In short, they grow. And all the time, Tick is getting close to a secret that he's been hiding from his Sydney world. Along the way, they meet and take with them a salt-of-the-earth mechanic, Bob, Bill Hunter, who confounds all expectations of such an archetype. Again, the road trip here in this film is a mirror of the main character's emotional journeys, literally across the heart. They are clearly unprepared for the trip outside their Sydney world, shown marvellously when they all get out of the bus, entranced and lost for words when they first see the road stretching out to infinity across nothingness. This 1994 film is filled with such visual splendours, whether it's Adam atop the bus, lip-syncing to opera while surrounded by billowing colours, or the fabulous cabaret costumes that draw on Australian flora, fauna and other cultural references. And I'm particularly fond of the emu costumes. Lizzie Gardner deservedly won the Oscar for costume design, working on a shoestring budget. The camera makes a point of focusing on the faces of the central characters, or bystanders, when the different cultures meet and sometimes clash. Typically when the city-siders meet the local Anglos or Indigenous Australians, or, most notably, an Asian cabaret performer entertaining the locals in Coober Pedy with an act markedly different to our heroes. But each of the three at this point has a different expression of delight, horrified fascination, and sadness. This film is a landmark in Australia, coming out, perhaps literally, at the same time as Muriel's Wedding. Both films held up a mirror to ourselves here, and we recognised ourselves with warm affection. Priscilla, to my mind, stands up really well after a quarter century. I'm not well placed to know if any of the content is dated for the queer community, but I hope that it's still embraced as it treats its characters with such respect while revelling in their idiosyncrasies and bitchy banter. And the film has some great lines, such as a dog named Herpes because if she's good, she'll heal. And it has a blink or you'll miss it cameo from Margaret Pomerantz as Adam's mother. She was the long-running co-host of Australia's movie review show here on TV. And Ricardo and I like to think of ourselves as their cultural heirs, so Margaret and David, if you're out there listening to us, hello, with love. The mystery of this film, though, is how it's been the only success of writer-director Stephen Elliott. I've tried watching his other films, such as Welcome to Whoop Whoop and Surfing Sarari, and I've just had to stop. Ricardo, are you on board with Priscilla?
Absolutely. I think this is such a classic of Australian cinema. Every part of this movie is very good. And you just mentioned one-liner there. There's so many to choose from in this film.
A couple of them I'd heard before, even before this film came out a long time ago, that I felt were kind of being reused, but there are some very original ones too.
Oh, there are. I mean, it's filled with them. It's such a funny film. And you're right, it came out at the same time as Muriel's Wedding, and both of them were very, very good.
Very seminal films here.
This film is small but large. It's got some really great scope to it in terms of filmically. You know, all those shots of them on the rock and everything like that. It was just wonderful and beautiful visually. You know, with the desert. You know, you've got the colour matching with the desert. It's stunningly made and beautifully executed. But you know what I really love at the heart of this film? I love Hugo Weaving's relationship with his son.
Oh, yes.
I think that's a real heart of the story, and Hugo Weaving is so wonderful in the role.
Well, in general, but yes.
Oh, in general, yes, but in this role...
He's a very fine actor.
He's just wonderful, and him being afraid of his son's acceptance
which is such a non-issue as it turns out.
But that's wonderful. That's what's so nice about it.
I'm agreeing, yeah.
I mean, every one of them have dilemmas and are, confronted, specifically Guy Pearce's character in terms of physically, which is quite, for that specific character who's very flamboyant and very sort of...
arch.
For him to go through that and to see him break down over that, they're doing what they're doing because they love what they do and that is them, but, to be judged so much all the time about who you are, about what you do, must be just incredibly exhausting.
Well, the Guy Pearce character, Adam, he is a very self-absorbed character. He's kind of sliding through life, taking advantage of his mother, having a good time, and then he does have that moment where he gets high and he just goes too far in the wrong place with the wrong people, and is only saved by his travelling companions. And what's quite nice is at the end, when they leave to go back to Sydney, which would be an interesting film in its own right, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
He's actually,
Priscilla too.
He's the one sitting down at the back of the bus with Tick's son, almost acting like an uncle to him.
Yeah.
It's a nice little subtle way of saying, he's changing too.
I really love the moments when Bernadette is having a drink off with...
I think it's Cheryl,
Cheryl?
the lady in the white singlet.
That's right. And before that, he says that classic one-liner, why don't you go light your tampon and blow your box apart because it's the only bang you're ever going to get.
And that's the moment when all the guys, the Outback men in that hotel who are just looking at them askance, they all laugh and it just breaks the tension beautifully.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. But yeah, the costumes you mentioned, I mean, apparently they did have a shoestring budget for the costumes.
I think it was something like $20,000 for everything. Certainly that thong dress that Tick, or Mitzi in his other persona, wears down the main street of Broken Hill, which here is an archetypal outback town.
Yeah.
Cost $17 buying the thongs from Kmart, I think.
Jeepers. It was really stunning, and to win an Academy Award, but it was really deserved because what they actually did was, incredible. And obviously the bus sequence where Guy Pearce's character is sitting on the bus and lip syncing to opera
on top of the bus,
with that beautiful flowing, silver.
Well, they do it twice, but the silver one, yes.
It's stunning visually. There's so much about it, which is just brilliant.
You mentioned Lizzie Gardner winning the Best Costume Design Oscar for this film. And those of a certain age might remember that when she accepted her Oscar, she wore a dress made out of gold Amex cards, I think stapled together or something.
Oh, really? Oh, yes.
Remember that?
Yes,
that was that film.
Yes, I do.
What's also interesting is that this is one of the very few films, I think it may be as few as 3 films, to win Best Costume Design for a film set in contemporary times. It's not a historical period piece. Right. It's not sci-fi. It's not fantasy, which traditionally win this Oscar.
Usually, it would go to like The English Patient or something like that,
or Marie Antoinette kind of films, or Star Wars or something. This is certainly, as of a couple of years ago, I know it was one of 3, and I must find out what those other 2 are. But it's a bravura performance from her, if you like.
And it really is a road trip. The stopping along of towns and what they go through, I just think the learning about these characters along the way, at the very beginning, you don't know who they are. They're just some flamboyant people, and suddenly, they've got heart, they've got emotion. It
was really great for me. I saw this film when it first came out, and this is the first time I think I've seen it all the way through since. And it was really great for me to watch it at this point in my life, because my family is from Broken Hill, which is their first major stop.
Right, yes.
And my entire family clan went back there last month for a big family occasion. Hello, Mum and Dad. And so to watch the film, having been there recently, just for me gave that added dimension. And it really does sit at the heart of Australia in many ways, this film, I think. I do have a problem with this film. And I can't remember if I had this problem when I first saw it all those years ago, but I was really aware of it this time. There aren't really any positive women in this film, and some of the attitudes to women in general leave me thinking...
hang on, Hugo Weaving's wife is quite okay.
I think she's an underwritten character. Like, she's just too bluff and hearty. Diane Craig, she's a great Australian actress.
Okay.
But there
You
wasn't
think just too accepting?
there wasn't much to her. She was a plot device for me. You had you had Cheryl, the woman in the truckie singlet, with that line you mentioned earlier, who's a great comic device.
Yeah, she is.
You've got the Asian cabaret performer.
Oh, we haven't mentioned.
Well, I did at the start with her amazing. How shall I put this? Her amazing routine of dispensing ping pong balls across a room using her vagina. In an amazing zebra-striped outfit, which apparently the actress provided herself, with a very interesting zip integration, can I say?
And it was Bill Hunter's character's...
Yes, someone who got saddle whipped when he got drunk one night somewhere in Asia.
Yeah.
When I first saw it, I remember gasping. This was just so foreign to me, and kind of laughing in horrified delight, can I say?
Yeah, absolutely.
But this time around, I really noticed the looks on the faces of the three main characters of these different emotions. So Bernadette, to me, looked quite sorrowful, about this being womanhood, which is something that she had chosen in her life.
Yeah.
Mitzi looked like, oh my God, I can't believe this. What is this? And Adam/Felicia, which is Guy Pearce's character, was doing his thing where he's hopping up and down the spot and just cupping his hands together, just absolutely stoked about the whole thing. And that little moment was really insightful to each of their characters that I really missed the first time around. And so there's a lot of craft in this film.
Oh, there is.
And I don't understand why Stephen Elliott hasn't been able to do it again.
I don't understand that either. I mean, look, I watched a fantastic documentary. I know
the one you mean, yes.
Yeah, called Killing Priscilla, and it was...
which Lizzie Gardner herself made.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She turned up to work on this film that you're going to mention in a moment, and she just recently acquired some video camera, and with Stephen Elliott's permission, I think she just started filming what's going on. So
it's an amazing documentary. If you ever want to look at that documentary... It's
only 55 minutes.
Yeah, it's called Killing Priscilla. It's based on the making of Stephen Elliott's next film, which was Eye the Beholder, with Ewan McGregor, and I think it was Ashley Judd, maybe?
Yes, and also Katie Lang, I think.
If you want to look at an inside of making a film in Hollywood, it really is a good eye-opener for that. But anyway, getting back to Priscilla, this is a classic. This is a classic of Australian cinema. There's not that many films in Australia which tend to travel internationally. I mean, really, there's Crocodile Dundee, there's, Muriel's
and become
Wedding,
iconic for us.
And become iconic, yeah.
In a way that Crocodile Dundee, for me, in Australia, has kind of done, but I think it's getting a bit lost now. Like, it might have had its time.
Well, that has now, yeah.
Whereas I think this film has got more staying power.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it's dated that much at all.
No.
I don't. I still think, thematically it's fine. I still think that the story is a great story. The characters' journeys are relatable. This has not dated that much. I mean, yes, it misses a mobile phone, but that's about it.
Well, it doesn't necessarily miss it.
Yeah.
Here's my theory on Stephen Elliott. So Stephen Elliott hit the big time locally and internationally with this film, which is a very funny, over-the-top, there are quite odd characters, there's exaggerations of Australianness in this film, and it was deservedly recognised as such. But that the path I think he's followed since, from what I've seen in things like Surfing Safari and Welcome to Whoop Whoop, is he's followed that part of what made that film successful, and I don't think it's working. Maybe it's stale and tired, maybe he just can't do it again.
I don't know. Welcome to Whoop Whoop I couldn't get into, and I haven't seen Surfing Safari.
I've only seen bits of it.
I did watch a lot of Eye the Beholder, and I thought that was actually okay. I didn't mind it, even though he had a lot of troubles with it. I didn't mind that one.
What I wanted to say was that I think he should actually follow the craft he displays in other parts of Priscilla. So that moment of the three main characters watching this horrific cabaret show going on, or even the way that when they get stuck out in the middle of nowhere because their bus breaks down, because, as I say, they're clearly unprepared, and they meet an Anglo couple who, once they realise who they're dealing with, just abandon in the middle of nowhere. And it's the indigenous people nearby who actually embrace them. I
really love that moment.
Yes.
I think that's a fantastic moment. And,
and it's not overwritten or heavy-handed.
It's not. And you've just brought a great moment in there, which I just love in terms of musically.
And the way the camera looks at different people around the fire and how they're responding.
Oh, it's such a great moment. And then... Yeah, musically, which one are they singing? I think they're singing... Which song was it they're singing?
Was it Finally, wasn't it?
Yeah, Finally.
Or was it a big cabaret number?
No, I think it was Finally. But then the didgeridoos and the Aboriginals start playing their instruments to that
and the
song.
way the didgeridoo kind of integrates
and
with
then
the
song.
Aboriginal singing.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
just wonderful. It's really wonderful.
And I think that Stephen Elliott needs to trust that part of his skill much more and move away from the kitsch kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because that shows he's a very assured filmmaker.
I think he's a very good filmmaker.
But I don't think we've seen it. I haven't at least seen it again since.
It's disappointing that he hasn't matched that in the films, because I even with those films though, I can still see he's got a vision. And every time I watch Priscilla, I go, wow, he's very good. You know, he's a major talent to come out of the industry. It's just, we'll waiting for the next classic. I think it's a high bar he's set for himself. You know.
Yeah. So, where are you going to rate Priscilla?
Oh, look, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. In terms of where it sits in Australian cinema, it's up there as one of the best I've seen. I think there's other classic Australian movies as well, but this one here, I don't know, it does so much and says a lot, and it's enjoyable when it's trying to say things. So I'm giving it a 9.
Well, for me, actually, it's a 9 also.
Oh wow!
It leaves me wondering how I would rate Muriel's Wedding. You know, it's contemporary, because I'm going to have to rate that at least the same. So I'm hoping I'm leaving enough room to go with Muriel.
Yeah, absolutely.
But look, there is so much to admire about this film. It's one of a kind in a really smart, savvy, beautiful way. As I say, I'm just a little uncomfortable. The women are kind of absent or not terribly interesting or worthy of your attention by and large. The closest you get to it is that amazing cabaret performance. So there is so much to admire about it, and I say there's a real, deft hand at work in this film, and I just wish I could see more of it.
Do you know one thing we failed to mention is ABBA.
Oh well, ABBA's much stronger in Muriel's Wedding. It was interesting both films brought them to the fore
but
here.
They still use the ABBA shots
the
of
movements and so on.
Yeah, movements and everything. And so, Muriel's Wedding and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, used ABBA's music, and it sparked a massive revival in Australia. From
Australia, it spread out again.
It spread out again. And ABBA's obviously referenced by Felicia when, she has a necklace vial.
Oh no! Don't go there.
Yeah, with an ABBA turd, which she got out of the toilet
from
from an ABBA concert, which is hilarious. Yeah, but like I said, there's so many moments in the movie which I like that, which just make you laugh. It's really a classic of Australian cinema.
And I have to say, the film starts and ends in the same place. And in fact, apparently these scenes were filmed on the same day, where Guy Pearce and Hugo Weaving's characters are performing, lip-syncing to songs in this Sydney bar.
Yeah.
And that gives it a nice circularity. But I also love the little sequence over the end credits.
Yes.
So they have someone, and you have no idea who it is because they're semi-lit in the lighting, who is lip-syncing to Vanessa Williams singing Save the Best to Last, which is a lovely song.
Yeah.
And this person's giving a very soulful performance. And when I first saw it, I was looking and thinking, it's not Hugo Weaving, it's not Guy Pearce, it's not Terence Stamp. I don't know who this is supposed to be. Was it the Aboriginal guy in the desert? No, it's not him. Well, I can now say with confidence, because I've Googled it, that is Tim Chappell, who was Lizzie Gardner's assistant on costume design in the movie. Tim Chappell just does it beautifully. And maybe a little footnote on this is that this is the first film that you and I have actually watched together in preparing for this podcast, because we've been on the road. We don't normally do that. And we watched it with my brother-in-law Craig. Hello, Craig, who was a farmer. And I don't want to start getting into stereotypes and so on, but Craig enjoyed this film every much as you and I did.
Absolutely. And that's its beauty. So that concludes season 3, Greg.
In a new and exciting environment, my car.
I know, of the Filmmaker Film Watcher podcast. Thanks everyone for listening to this season. It's been a really enjoyable one.
This trip has been, as I say, unusual, but enjoyable not only for its novelty, but the fact that we have been to the Podcast Awards, which for us is a big step.
Thank you everybody for listening to us.
We're always so pathetically grateful.
We look look forward to season 4. There will be a season 4.
In the latter half of this year, we're hoping.
Again, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Tell other people about us,
And go watch and enjoy films, because that's what we do, and that's why we like doing this.
Yeah, it's just about a love for cinema and for all different types of cinema, old and sometimes new.